This is the story of Anastasia. So, Anastasia Nikolovna was born on June 18th, 1901, in a town near St. Petersburg, Russia. Her father was Nicholas II, Russia's final Tsar, who was a part of the Romanov dynasty that has ruled the country for like 3 centuries. And her mother, who's not a queen, but her mother was Princess Alexa of Hesse. Yeah, Hesse. I know it's spelled like Hesse, but anyway, it's Hesse. So, her friends called her Alexandra Fyodorovna. But anyway, so the day Anastasia was born, the king and the queen were ecstatic to welcome their newborn baby girl. After the 7 years of grief due to Nicholas's father, who was passing away from kidney disease, they couldn't help the big grins on their faces. The queen was like, the princess, my bad. She was all like, oh, she's beautiful. And the king being superior, and he had to help make his old comeback. And he was all like, well, obviously, that's my baby. And she was all like, well, how do you know? But anyway, enough of that. So Anastasia's 3 older sisters, Olga, who was 6 years old at the time, enters the room with the biggest frown on her face. She was all like, ew, like what the hell is that? And her being the oldest, she knew she had to be the responsible one. So, she didn't really like that. She was all like, not another one. And then she said, you guys are like rabbits. And the princess was like, it's not my fault. Your dad's the one who works the magic. And of course she ran away like, okay, I really don't need to hear that. So then she left. But then in came next her younger sister Tatiana, who was 4 years old at the time. She entered the room with not a care in the world, and she saw Anastasia, and she was all like, oh, she's so little. She thought she was really adorable. And then last but not least, Maria, who was 2 years old, entered the room, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. She walked in next to her mother and getting on her tippy toes. She sees Anastasia wrapped up in a bloody blanket, and she started bawling her eyes out. She was all like, she was like, Mommy, what's wrong? What's wrong with her? She was like, nothing, she's just ugly. But anyway. But eventually, the ugly baby Anastasia grew up to be a very cheerful and chirpy child who loved to wear long and frilly dresses with her hair pinned up and curled. Basically, your normal kid. She loved to dance and twirl in her family's house's rose garden. Known as the prankster who broke many rules, she would always forget about like the thorns on the rose bushes and stuff, and she would always get hurt, but luckily there was Grigory Rasputin, who was like a holy man and a healer to the family. He would tend to her wounds and everything like that, but eventually he became extremely close to the family and simultaneously building a strong bond with Anastasia and the rest of the family. Since she was homeschooled around noon, every day her mom would call her into her studies to teach her spelling and her prayers for an hour or 2. But sometimes she wouldn't listen, so then she would just be like, Anastasia, get your funky ass up in here. Because she wouldn't listen. But anyway, as she grew older, her mother assigned her a Swiss tutor because they would always catch hands, and Anastasia was like, the way you teach is whack. And her mom was like, what? I bet you won't say it again. And she was like, catch me outside, how about that? And her mom was like, say no more, babe. And she was all like, bam, 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 swing, 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 scratch, 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 and such breaking. Afterwards, Anastasia would leave and come back for round 2 looking like, and lose again because, mom always wins. But anyway, unfortunately, though, Anastasia wasn't the only one who was having a hard time. The tight-knit Romanov family lived peacefully until Anastasia's father started gaining public hostility during the World War I. So basically, they were dissing him and stuff because he couldn't rule right. So basically, the people of Russia were just saying that they were unhappy and that they wanted a new ruler and things weren't being changed and they wanted a communist government rather than having an imperialist leader. So then after hearing the wants from the people, Nicholas II finally had decided to step down from the throne in order to prevent a civil war from occurring in Russia as the soldiers launched a mutiny and began seizing royal property. As a result of abdicating the throne, though, Anastasia and her family were exiled into the mountains where it's freezing cold and they were placed under house arrest, which in my opinion is kind of messed up. Nicholas II was liked by a lot of people, and the fact that he had to step down, and not only step down, but move out of his palace and his home with his whole family, it's kind of sad to see that the children were stripped from the one place that they know as being their home, But unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. On the night of July 16th of 1918, the Romanov family were awoken by a servant, and they were asked to get dressed while the Bolsheviks, who were led by Vladimir Lenin, I believe is his name, they fought to replace the imperial rule with the new communist regime. But on the orders of the Supreme Soviet Council of Russia, Yakov Zhuravsky, commander of the Special House of Purpose, led Anastasia and her family down to a basement under the impression that they were being protected from the impending chaos. So basically what happened was the servant was awoken and she was told to go and wake up Nicholas and the rest of the family, which she then led downstairs to meet with Yakov Jurovsky, who then told them that they needed to all go downstairs into the basement. So after he led them down into the basement, he told them that there were orders from the executive committee that Nicholas was supposed to be executed. But in reality, Yakov Jurovsky was the one who was sent out to kill Nicholas, along with his 2 other soldiers. But since the rest of the family had witnessed Yakov Jurovsky execute Nicholas, if they would have let them go, word would have gotten out that it was not the executive committee that made orders to kill Nicholas. So that changed the plans, which meant that now the rest of the family had to die. But since initially the 2 soldiers that were with Yakov Jurovsky only had orders to kill Nicholas, they were not okay with killing the children. So then Yakov Jurovsky fired them and hired 2 other soldiers who would be okay with killing Anastasia and the rest of the family. So it was then in that cold and dark basement the Romanov legacy had seemed to have been silenced forever and ever. And ever, and ever, and ever, and ever. In the years following the Romanovs' execution, many different perspectives were roused as to whether or not Anastasia and her brother Alexei had survived the execution. Though it was also thought that it was Maria, since the bones that were found both resembling and belonging to somebody from around the same age. However, though, the mystery was solved in 1991. And this was when a forensic investigation identified 9 bodies, and he figured out that they were belonging to Anastasia's family members and servants. But Anastasia and her brother's bodies still had appeared to be missing at the time. So since Anastasia's fate was unknown and no one knew what happened to her, a number of women were claiming to be, Grand Duchess Anastasia. And so word got out, and there were plenty of women who were auditioning or basically coming in and saying that they were Anastasia and that they had been missing to, protect themselves or whatever reason. But among all of the women, there was one who went the farthest and was actually had everyone fooled into thinking that she was really Anastasia. And this was Anna Anderson, who, beginning in the 1920s, fought to prove herself the rightful claimant of Anastasia's inheritance. Luckily, though, her suit was rejected in the 70s, so the mystery of the Grand Duchess Anastasia remained unsolved. But because of it, Anastasia's whereabouts inspired books and movies and plays, and including an Academy Award film, Anastasia, 1956. It's you guys should watch it. But anyway. So then after all of that was sorted out, later on in the 1970s, an amateur archaeologist found a shallow grave containing well-aged skeletons and stuff, but it had 6 adults and 3 children. And so he decided to suppress these findings from the public until the Soviet Union had collapsed in the early 1990s. So after all of these speculations on Anastasia's whereabouts, a new DNA analysis of other grave was discovered in 2007, which conclusively identified Anastasia and Alexei's bodies. So after almost 90 years of mystery and bewilderment, Anastasia's mystery was finally finalized. But yet still, no one really knows what exactly happened to her. All we know is that she was killed separately, or at least buried separately from the rest of the family. But there are many, 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 many theories. But here are some of the theories that are the most common. So basically, one of them is that what actually happened on the night of the execution was that Anastasia and her younger brother Alexei, who were thought to have survived the event due to the jewels or something that were sewn into their clothing. I don't know, because they were rich or whatever. And so whenever the executors had shot them, everything was just kind of pew, pew, and it was ricocheting off of their clothes. So then the executors had to find an alternative to kill them, so they had to stab them to death. And yeah, that's pretty terrible, but that's a theory. So another common theory, which was also used in Disney's animated film Anastasia, the good one, also starts with Anastasia and her grandmother on her father's side, Marie Dorovna. who was trying to flee the execution, and so they were trying to catch a train in order to get to safety. But with everyone running in chaos, since there was like a war or something like that going on, Anastasia lost track of her grandmother and was held behind the crowd of the people that were running around and screaming and everything. But with everyone running, she was like pushed and she fell and she hit her head on the train track. And so she fell into unconsciousness and the train rode away with Marie. But yet still, no one really truly knows what exactly happened to her that night. Like, where did she go? And even if she did live, how long did she live for? You know, where had she gone and who really killed her? You know, when was she really buried, you know? But with what we do know, this is a story of Grand Duchess Anastasia.